Welcome to FreedomCast, a podcast dedicated to interviewing star icons and entrepreneurs who have encouraged others to become more healthy and active. My name is Ashton, and it's my pleasure to host you as we take another trip through the fitness industry. It's entertaining and informative, and I hope it makes fitness more exciting and special to you in your own fitness journey. FreedomCast is supported by Freedom Fitness Equipment in Charlotte, North Carolina. Freedom Fitness Equipment serves the health and fitness community nationwide, from free weights and strength equipment for home gyms and studios to cardio and conditioning equipment for commercial spaces. Check them out at freedomfitnessequipment.com. Let's get rolling with today's show. Can you talk just a little bit, or as much as you want, about how MeatRx, the company itself, came to be and why or how you even came up with the concept of the carnivore diet as a diet? It seems to me it would be more of a lifestyle, but tell me if I'm wrong about that.
Well, I mean, with regard to, founding MeatRx, it was kind of interesting. I had already was starting to work in that direction as far as, trying to develop a community around this, and provide support and actually have a community that kind of gets things done on a sort of a social level to where we can start to shift the narrative a little bit. And, but I just didn't have the technical expertise when it came to the computer side of things. And so I had a person that contacted me, who's now my co-founder. She is a data scientist that was in Silicon Valley and was greatly affected positively by following a carnivore diet. And she actually reached out to me and said, "Hey, I really want to work with you. And, I this is something I really want to do." And I, gave her some thought, and we launched that, and we started that, about a year and a half ago. And we've had success from the get-go. I mean, it's been working, and it's been, we've been growing pretty rapidly, and we've got, thousands and thousands of members now. And we're seeing just tremendous wins, as far as getting people healthier, but also, doing some of these other things with regard to getting research done. We're funding a pretty aggressive study for that. So we're making headway on that.
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah. So we're doing well with that. But as far as, how I, as far as lifestyle or whatever, I think diet is part of a lifestyle. And you can either, some people choose to live it on a healthy lifestyle generally, and some people do it sometimes, and some people just could care less. And, I think diet is part of that. I think it's a very important part of your health. And so whether you do a carnivore based diet or something else, you should at least be thinking about it. If you care about quality of life, and some people, it's not the first thing on their mind. And, and granted, depending on what your situation is, you may not have to think about it. If you're young and healthy and you've been relatively comfortable, you may not care about any of this stuff. But, most people, after a certain age, this stuff catches up to you, or some people, it starts out early. And so unfortunately, it's the majority of people that end up needing to correct their lifestyle due to, what they're doing currently.
Sure. Did you start eating a majority meat-based? How many years ago did that start for you personally, and what even led you into starting to do that? Did you hear from some other research, or did you start developing this kind of on your own?
Yeah, no, I certainly wasn't the first guy to do this by no means. And I've given credit to the folks that have done this for, it goes back. There's physicians back in the 1700s that were doing this stuff, it's gone on for forever and ever. And probably before that, this is what we have records of. I'm 54 now. I think I was around 42 or 43. And, I was an athlete. I'm still an athlete, and I was competing at very high levels. And, just got done winning a world championship. I remember in something called the Highland Games, where you put on a kilt and you throw big, heavy, whatever, poles or shot put things. And I was very, very accomplished athlete, training very hard, but I noticed my health was taking a turn for the worse. I was developing, I'm sure, metabolic syndrome. I was probably pre-diabetic. I was not sleeping, had sleep apnea, all these types of things that go with, they're all kind of clustered together. And I realized that that's not how I wanted to feel and be for any longer. And so even though like I said, even though I was doing the training part of it, so I started playing with my diet again. This is, over 10 years ago now. And I kind of Went initially low fat, lots of vegetables, lots of fiber, some lean meat. Was able to lose weight doing that. That does work.
Yeah.
But I was just miserable. I mean, I was just like, I can't live this way. There's no way I can sustain this. I mean, it's just not what I'd want to do for the rest of my life. And I was hungry all the time. I was, grouchy. And I remember the nurses at the hospital, they said, "Hey, we like the fat Dr. Baker better." I mean, there's some truth to that. I mean, I wasn't that fat. I wasn't like fat, but I was just a big dude. And so then I started shifting, and I went on kind of more of a Paleolithic diet, and played with that for a couple of years, and did pretty well. And then wound up doing a lot of research and reading, and started shifting towards low carbohydrate diets and then ketogenic diets. And during the ketogenic diet, I was always eating a lot of meat. I mean, I was like, this is part of it. I'm going to do it, and I enjoyed it, and it just made sense to me. But I was still pounding all the big salads and doing some of the keto treats and fat bombs, and I just I was better, particularly when it comes to satiety and appetite control. I felt there was more I could do. And then I started running these crazy, weird, nutty people just eating meat. I thought this is very bizarre, but I ended up kind of, this is on social media, and I was following these people and watching them and listening to them, and what they said made sense. And I started looking at some of their source literature and read it. And, and then I said, well, what the heck, I'm just going to try it. And so I tried it initially I would just do one day. I'd say, I'm just going to do one day of eating steak and eggs. And I actually felt pretty good those days. And then I would string it into longer stretches. And eventually I got to where I was 1 month. So I'm going to do it for 30 days. And I was on social media. I had a little bit of a following at that point, not what I have now, but I mean, there's still several thousand people. Mm-hmm. And, we jokingly said, what am I going to die of? Surely this 30 days will just kill me. And, it was like scurvy or heart attack, or your colon's going to fall because there's no fiber and all that stuff. And, at the end of 30 days, obviously none of that happened. Mm-hmm. And I felt great. I was like, wow, this is really interesting to me. After that 30-day period was over, I said, well, I'm just going to go back to eating my kind of regular, healthy, omnivorous diet. And I did. And I mean, literally within a day, I started feeling not as good. I was like, I'm starting to get aches back. My digestion's not feeling as good. My energy's worse. So I was like, screw that. I prefer to feel good. And so I went back to meat. And I've basically been there for now going up, it's closing in on 5 years now. And, I continue to, not die.
That's phenomenal. So just so people understand, are you talking about completely meat-based, as in zero vegetables, zero fiber, all animal byproducts, or do you have any other stuff outside of that?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, if you look what I had today, I had 5 pounds of steak for breakfast. It's melon over there.
Holy cow.
That's a pretty typical day for me. I don't eat much else. I mean, over the 5 years, I would say probably 95% of my diet has been straight up red meat. That's been what it's been. Within that 5%, sometimes I'll, go for a period of time, I'll eat some eggs, or sometimes I'll eat some seafood. Sometimes I'll eat some pork or bacon. Sometimes I'll have some dairy products, some cheese or yogurts or stuff like that. Every once in a while, I'll put some spices on my meat occasionally, but 99% of the time it's just salt. Every once in a great while, I'll have on my kid's birthday, I might have a slice of cake, but it's, it's been, and, I do that not because I'm craving and need to have it. It's just kind of a social concession. I'll have a glass of wine from time to time, but I mean, generally, I would say, 99% of my diet is 100% animal based. And, I honestly have never felt better. I mean, I perform as good as I've ever performed in my life. I mean, I'm just, it just works really well.
I used to do CrossFit, and there's a couple of reasons I quit it. One, because I'm naturally, thin, and it made me thinner. What's your opinion on the differences between these two? Because that's pretty heavy on the meat side already. It does have vegetables and that kind of thing, but why did you, for example, not stick with that? Because I mean, there's ways I feel like you could stick to still meat heavy and still have some vegetables, or did you just feel like it wasn't satiating enough or something?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, and I don't disagree. There's many people that do fine. I mean, they do completely fine with a whole food omnivorous diet. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Except for the people where it doesn't work, and there's many people where it doesn't. And, it's like I said, it's not like I didn't try having vegetables and salads and meat. I did that. And I honestly, completely objectively do better on just meat when I omit those foods. And so while we hear that fruits and vegetables are great and we should eat more of them, but it's, you think about what drives that sort of ideology is really when you're eating fruits and vegetables, and that's taking up a portion of your diet. What are you not eating? Typically, you're not eating Twinkies and Doritos and ice cream, right? I mean, this is where you're making those substitutions. And yeah, I would argue that's a healthier substitution. I think what incorrectly gets applied is that they think that meat is somehow bad for us. I mean, this is, you think about meat is something human beings have eaten as long as there have been human beings on the planet. This is something we have evolved to eat. And one of the reasons perhaps why we even evolved in the first place is because of meat consumption. There's, if you believe in an evolutionary approach, which I personally do, ample evidence to show that we were high-level meat eaters. We were, very carnivorous. You can look at radioisotope data. You can look at isotopic data. You can look at, depictions in cave paintings. You could look at, all kinds of, modern hunter-gatherers, looking at the value they put on meat. You can look at all the fossil records, so on and so forth. It's just, you can look at the bioenergetic requirements for human beings, the digestive system. It all points to heavy meat eating. But really what's really the real important answer is what happens in 2021. What happens when you eat a bunch of meat? If it's bad for you, like people might say, I should be, the average, look at this, the average American eats around 2.4 ounces of red meat a day.
Okay.
That's it. And then people say, oh, how much meat you're eating. If we look at it, like beef in this country, according to our, the statistics we have, the average American eats around about 56 to 58 pounds of beef a year. That's, in 365 days, it's 56 pounds of beef. So it's not that much. It's, well below, a quarter of a pound a year, or a day rather. And to say that quarter pound of beef is somehow driving all the disease, when we look at what else we're eating, 60% of our diet is coming from ultra processed refined foods, refined grains, sugars, seed oils, high fructose corn syrup, canola oil, soybean oil, chemical ingredients, garbage. That's the problem there. And the fact that I eat 5 pounds of meat a day, 4 pounds of meat a day, this is like 25 times the average American's diet of red meat. If red meat were truly bad for you, I should be one of the sickest people on the planet. Instead, I'm breaking world records as an athlete. I'm walking around with a six pack at 54 years of age. I'm doing sports, I'm competing against guys 30 years younger than me. And, I had a cardiac scan, coronary artery calcium scan, zero plaque, not an ounce of plaque in me. My inflammatory markers are basically zero. My insulin is as low as it can go. Triglycerides are next to nothing. So my blood pressure is completely normal. It's all these things that, I wake up every day, with a lot of energy, and I'm working out twice a day, it's like, I'm a healthy guy. Yeah. And meat is not the problem. It never has been. If you look, there are many meat eating societies that were strong, robust, healthy people. And, the knock is, we talk about, the ancient, Paleolithic man only lived to 30. Well, that's wrong, actually. What it is the overall life expectancy because of super high infant mortality rates. 1 out of 2 children are dead. That automatically cuts your life expectancy in half. So if every child that dies at birth, the max you can be is 40. If you think at 80 right now, if 1 out of every 2 kids born today was dying at birth, our life expectancy would be 40 infant mortality rate. And you couple that with accidental deaths, infections, traumas, but the natural lifespan of these people was 70 and 80, and it still is in these indigenous tribes. And even back then, they found fossil remains of people that they suspect were in their 70s and 80s, thousands and thousands of years ago. So this belief that they didn't live long is just ridiculous. We have historical accounts of people like, Da Vinci living into his 80s, back when the life expectancy was 30. So we know that you can live long, and it's not because, it's not because you ate one way or the other. It's just because, you were fortunate enough not to be eaten by a lion or, in some accident where we had no medical care. So that argument about, they only lived a short period of time is basically garbage.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm going to address so this is a topic that's kind of near to my heart because my dad had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And you talk about the American diet and how that influences cancer and, cancer outcomes. We got heavy metals in our food and a bunch of other garbage that you mentioned right off the top there, which I totally agree with. How do you answer the red meat link? Because I think I'm not educated on this. You are far more educated on this than I am. How do you answer the questions or concerns about cancer specifically in regards to this?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's one that comes up. And typically what we see is in regards to colorectal cancer. That's usually the strongest association, epidemiologic association around red meat. The World Health Organization through the IARC, the International Association for Research on Cancer, in 2015 proclaimed that unprocessed red meat was a type 2 carcinogen and processed was a type 1 carcinogen.
Wow.
That was based almost exclusively on epidemiologic studies. So basically that is, you take a big population and you say, how much red meat are you eating? How likely is it you to get cancer? That's not a very good science. In fact, it's a very poor science. And often that very scientific collection process involves something called a food frequency questionnaire, where I hand you a 20-page booklet of foods, and you just go through and mark how much you think you ate in the last 6 months. The accuracy of that is horrible. We know that. In fact, the validation studies, when we look at the FFQs, I mean, there was one I looked at recently, it was done in 2018, looking at, I think it was a German FFQ, and they basically had people weigh, measure, and write down what they ate for 4 days. And they measured everything, with very, very good accuracy. 30 days later, they asked them to recall what they thought they ate during that same period of time. They only got, and they had 25 separate categories for food. And of those 25 categories, only 9 of them were they able to correctly get it at least 50% right. 16 out of 25, they weren't even 50% correct. So that's horrible. But the conclusion of the study was, well, it's good enough for nutritional epidemiology because they know the bar is so low for that. So first of all, that's the type of data we're looking at for probably 90% of this red meat causes cancer. And so when we look at the relative risk, and we've got to understand the difference between relative risk and absolute risk. So relative risk, according to that data, the World Health Organization is 1.17 for red meat, unprocessed red meat. So that's a 17% increase in your likelihood of getting cancer.
Yep.
That sounds big and kind of scary. But if we look at something called the Bradford Hill criteria, not until that number exceeds 200% or even 500% is it even considered relevant to consider thinking that it's possibly causative. If we looked at smoking, the number wasn't 17%. It was something like 2,000%, 3,000%. These are the percentages we're getting before we could infer that smoking causes cancer. So it's such a small, incredibly small relative risk, but more importantly, we need to understand absolute risk. And so if I said your relative risk of getting struck by lightning was doubled, you would say, okay, that's not very likely because I'm not going to get struck by lightning anyway, right? Your relative risk for winning the Powerball lottery has been doubled by doing this one thing. Is it meaningful? And so when we look at colorectal cancer, with on average about 4%, your odds of getting colorectal cancer are about 4%. Pretty low. Okay. I mean, it's not nothing, but it's, so the odds of you not getting it are 96%. If you eat meat, according to the World Health Organization, that 4% risk goes up to about 5%. So now you still have a 95% of not getting colorectal cancer. So, it's still, we're talking at tiny, tiny differences. 100%. And so is that worth it to give up, even if you believe what they say? And I think there's pretty strong evidence to show that what they say is not even credible anyway. But even if you believe that, is it worth giving up some of the most nutritious food on the planet so you can avoid a 1% absolute risk in something like colorectal cancer, which honestly, if we look at the risk factors for colorectal cancer, for instance, we look at obesity, it's like 300% risk. If we look at insulin resistance, it's like 300% look. If it's chronic inflammation, it's like 300. All these are 300% versus a 17% stuff. The biggest risk factor for colorectal cancer, believe it or not, is having a history of inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, or ulcerative colitis. That increases your risk by like 3,000%. These are real deal numbers here. And so, but what happens to people with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease that go on a carnivore diet? Guess what happens? The symptoms go away. Their disease goes away. Wow. So you completely mitigate your, so let's say you start out and you're the classic American, big beer gut, big beer belly, pre-diabetic, chronically inflamed, your risk for colorectal cancer is up there. Okay. Yeah. You go on a carnivore diet, you lean out, your inflammation goes away, your insulin resistance goes away. You've just decreased your risk dramatically. I don't care how much meat you have. So that tiny little 1% absolute risk is meaningless in the grand scheme of things. And so that's how you have to think about it. You have to understand all the factors that go into this stuff. It's not just the only thing that causes colorectal cancer is red meat, which again, it doesn't cause it. There's no evidence that it really causes. There are associations with it with meat eaters, but again, they don't distinguish a meat eater from a junk food eater. This is what we have. We have standard American diet versus
Right.
someone like myself who doesn't eat junk food, who exercises, who cares about his health. Very, very different risk pool.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. So, if in those studies they studied someone who were to say just go on a regular, not a regular, a healthy diet, quote unquote, and go away from the norm, which is basically a bunch of junk food, and then compare that to say somebody who's eating, I don't know, even almost exclusively meat. Although I know that study hasn't come out yet, and you're working on funding it, because that seems like that would increase the factor in and of itself. Just eating this garbage compared to somebody who is just eating healthy. Maybe they were on the paleo diet. Have any studies been done on that?
Yeah, there's studies that are similar. I mean, this is, when they look at sort of vegetarians and vegans where they claim that they have, better health outcomes. And they've done a study called the Healthy Shopper study. It was done, I think, in the UK about 10 years ago.
Okay.
And so they looked at people that were eating a vegetarian diet, shopping at a health food store,
Mm-hmm.
and they just found other people that shop at the health food store that weren't eating a vegetarian diet. So these are people that are all health conscious. No difference in the outcome. Basically, if you remove the junk food from your diet, your mortality is better, your cardiovascular outcomes are better, your cancer outcomes are better. This is not something that should surprise anyone.
Yeah.
And again, I go back to the point that we are suffering. We are in a pandemic of chronic disease right now: obesity, diabetes, cancer, autoimmune disease, gut diseases, mental health illness. All of these things are, for the most part, at least to the degree we see them now, are relatively modern diseases. And, the former equivalent of the Surgeon General in the UK very rightly said it's preposterous to think that an ancient food is causing a modern disease. I mean, like I said, we have been eating meat in some cases tremendous quantities for millennia as human beings, and we never had these issues. If you look at the Canadian First Nations people, when they went away from their meat-based diet in the 1960s in some places,
Mm-hmm.
their cancer rates went up. When they included processed food, the grains, the flours, the sugars, so on and so forth, the packaged foods, their cancer rates went up significantly. When they were on their standard eating a bunch of meat, seal meat and seafood and caribou, they were very, very low. So, wow. I mean, it's, we just have ample evidence that this is not the issue.
Sure. Real quick on your credentials, I know you're a doctor. What kind of medicine do you practice?
So my background was orthopedic surgery. So, I went to medical school and, was practicing general orthopedic medicine. Basically I was doing hip and knee replacements and shoulder replacements and sports medicine and trauma surgeries and all that stuff. That was my background. I did that for about 2 decades. At this point, I founded this company, and now I focus solely on nutrition and lifestyle. So I don't actively, I have an active medical license. If I decided I wanted to go back to that, I could, but I'm not really. At this point, I'm so passionate and interested about lifestyle that's where my focus lies these days. So yeah, but I mean, I'm a classically trained physician. I was, a person that graduated, with honors from medical school and all that stuff. And I was a trauma surgeon in Afghanistan and,
oh, wow.
Did all kinds of interesting stuff with regard to medicine. But I found out that, I think unfortunately, I think the healthcare system is painfully broken in many ways. I mean, it's not that there aren't good people in there and good things can happen, but we have a systemic problem. It's systemically broken. And I just got frustrated dealing with it and decided to make an impact another way. And that's what I'm doing today through MeatRx and some of the other stuff I'm doing.
That's why I love the kind of stuff you're doing. I went into, actually had some low back pain from powerlifting recently. And the first thing that they did when they went in, I went in the urgent care just to get it checked out. One of the first things they prescribed were muscle relaxers and aspirin. I didn't ask them for drugs. I had never mentioned drugs. And that, you talk about problems with the medical field. The first thing they throw at you is not change this lifestyle habit, change that, change the way you're eating, whatever. It's let's get you a quick fix and hopefully that'll satisfy whatever you're going in for. I find it to be mind blowing.
Well, I mean, that's because that's what so many people go in are expecting. I mean, that's why they go to the doctor, because they want the drugs. I mean, in many cases, and so most of the people want that, and that's what they tend to give them. And so they make that assumption. They're not going to talk to you about what's going on in your diet and your sleep and how you exercise. I mean, and to be fair, most physicians aren't trained in that. They just don't have the expertise. You don't go to the physician to learn about how to eat or to exercise or even healthy behaviors, quite honestly, because physicians don't really have that unless they independently have an interest in that, but it's not taught to them during their medical curriculum. You are given tools to fix people with typically drugs or procedures. And that is, what medicine is. I mean, for the most part. I mean, there's every once in a while some people will, they'll shake their head and they might, put out some platitudes about, you need to take care of yourself better, and they'll give you a plan, or stop eating so much junk food or something like that. But it's not really anything that is actually actionable for most people. I mean, they might defer, they might send you to a nutritionist who's going to, often just tell you to eat a standard, the food plate guide, which for many people doesn't work, and it's unsustainable, and it doesn't address satiety and appetite, and, eat a balanced diet and eat in moderation. I mean, that's what everybody's doing. I mean, in many cases, that's what they're trying to do, and moderation doesn't work for most people.
Speaking of which, you talk about that food plate and the whatever it is that
Pyramid,
FDA,
yeah.
the food pyramid that I guess the FDA came up. Like, where in the heck did they get, like, I think grains at the bottom are the biggest category. I mean, what's any logical reasons behind that? I'm sure they have their own
those
studies
numbers
and
are
stuff.
largely arbitrary. I mean, they pick out, 5 servings of fruit and vegetables a day. I mean, it's all arbitrary. There's no magic sort of thing that gets it. This is all arbitrary stuff, the 11 grains and servings. You have to remember that the United States is tremendously blessed with farmland, and we produce a lot of grain. We produce an absolute tremendous amount of grain for the United States and throughout the world. Yeah. And that is one of the functions of the USDA, is promote agriculture. And so their food pyramid, their food guide has to support the agricultural system. And so that, those companies that feed into that actually help fund the USDA. And so the USDA is compromised in its interest. Its interests are competing with what is maybe perhaps a healthy diet. I think that, a grain-based diet certainly allows for calories. I mean, it's a cheap way to get calories out to people. Yeah. However, it is unfortunately relatively poor quality food. I mean, it really is. I mean, it has allowed civilizations to sort of develop and people to stay in one place, because, before, when you're hunter-gatherers, it's hard to establish cities when your food supply keeps moving around. You can't do that. So once you kind of consolidate the food supply, now you can develop cities, and then the structure that goes with them, and then the political structure and the civilization. And so that has been, either, depending on what you believe, either a good thing or a bad thing, but certainly has allowed for civilization and collective intelligence and, innovation and specialization and this type of stuff. What it has done to our human health is a different story. I mean, it's clearly been a detriment to human health. And so this is something, you can go back into the fossil records, and anytime you see pre-agricultural fossils, they were always of much better quality, stronger bones, better teeth, larger structures. Once you see these post-agricultural societies, the brain size is actually, most people don't know this, the human brain size has actually shrunk about 200 cc's, cubic centimeters, since about 100,000 years ago, as we went away from this, our food supply, which was largely these big, large mega herbivores with lots of fat and meat and lots of calories and very nutrient dense, to having to rely on grains and smaller animals and leaner meats and processing plants. But that's the reality of our human existence.
Sure. You mentioned leaner meats and cuts of meat. Do you differentiate between the fattier cuts and the lean cuts? Do you have preferences for one over the other, particularly with regards to carnivore diets?
Well, I think, obviously if you're eschewing carbohydrates, you got to get energy from somewhere, and protein is not necessarily the best source of energy. You can convert, protein into glucose to the gluconeogenesis, but it's not the easiest process. So you have to get a requisite amount of fat. And, I think ancestrally, it's pretty clear we were hunting large mega herbivores, which tend to have a decent amount of fat in them. And so, and most people prefer a better marbled steak. It just has more flavoring. I think there's a reason. There's a visceral reason, but I think it matches physiology. So I tend to, get at least a certain amount of fat in my diet. I couldn't survive on skinny, skinless, boneless chicken breast for the rest of my life. I would die. I mean, you have to have a certain, I'm literally, you would probably get sick and die, but you have to have you have to have a certain amount of fat. That fat's going to vary from individual. Someone who's highly active, like me, probably I can get away with a little more fat than somebody that might be a little more obese in some cases, but it depends on, it also helps with satiety in many cases. I know, for instance, for some reason, I'm still trying to figure it out. I can eat, I can easily put down 4, 5, 6 pounds of steaks, ribeyes and T-bones and New York strips and whatnot, skirt steaks. But if you put like more than 2 pounds of brisket in front of me, I can't do it, man. I don't know why. It's just whatever is in brisket it just fills me up, and I'm like stuffed. I almost tap out. I had 3 pounds of it the other day, and that was like, I was literally almost ready to die on that. But I don't know, but it might be the additional fat content that does that. And so there is, I think, there is a point where, it has an impact on satiety. And certain people, like, I know, for instance, diabetics sometimes will have better glycemic control with a higher fat ratio than protein for a number of reasons, which I can go into the physiology behind that, but that's, the short answer is it varies from person to person, but, you have to have at least some amount of fat in the diet. And I think I would be surprised if you can't really do, when it comes to caloric standpoint, getting much more than about 50% of your calories from protein is really hard to do and sustain. That's kind of like the limit for me for any long period of time. Most of the time, I'm probably getting my calories in the form of about 30 to 40% protein and the rest coming from fat.
Wow. Okay. So, so most of your, is it 70% fat, 30 to 40% lean protein or protein?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. And that's, if you think about a ribeye steak is about that. That's what a ribeye steak is. It's about 60, 65% fat. Just because you remember that fat is 9 calories per gram, protein is only 4 calories per gram in general. So even though it looks like a smaller amount, you relatively get a higher contribution of calories. So yeah. And then also lean meat is made out of water. Much lean meat is water.
Oh.
So 70% of ground beef is basically water. So when you cook, it always shrinks up because you're boiling off all the water. And that's what happens. So it's
also doesn't
water.
taste as good, to be perfectly frank. I was going to ask you about vitamin C deficiencies. You mentioned scurvy early on, and other sorts of whatever vitamin deficiencies. How do you address those or are there? Am I not understanding something about what's in meat and that it's fully sufficient?
Yeah, the sort of there's a legal argument for something that, I can't remember the Latin on this right now, but it speaks for itself. No one's getting scurvy. No legitimate case of scurvy have occurred in this diet in many years now. And so what we do know, and I'm sure we don't know it all, but we know back from as far back as 150 years ago, when people were exploring the circumpolar regions, they found that fresh meat was a cure for scurvy. If you had access to fresh meat, and it doesn't have to be like fresh off the animal. It can be just not previously like canned or previously dried meat.
Okay.
You have what it takes to prevent scurvy. There is actually, even though the USDA lists no vitamin C in meat, independent labs have on many different occasions, one in Germany and another independent lab, have shown that even meat from steak has about 10 milligrams of vitamin C per pound, which is about enough to stave off what we think is scurvy. But we also have to realize that our requirements for vitamins and minerals, whether it's magnesium or zinc or vitamin C or many other ones, are very different depending upon what our baseline diet is. That is to say that when you're on a high carbohydrate diet, your magnesium requirements actually go up. We also know that glucose, for instance, competes with vitamin C across a number of different transporters, whether it's the mitochondrial membrane or the membrane across the gut transporters. They're in direct competition. So the more glucose you have in your gut, the less vitamin C is going to get through. So you're going to be absorbing relatively more. We also know that the red cell can actually recycle vitamin C in our body. So there's lots of mechanisms. We also know that, for instance, uric acid, which we always associate uric acid with gout, but uric acid is also a very powerful antioxidant. Most people don't know that, but uric acid's function in the body is to be an antioxidant. Humans lost the capacity for an enzyme called a uricase. Uricase breaks down uric acid. So we accumulate uric acid, and we also lost the ability to synthesize vitamin C. So some people think that's a trade-off, that the antioxidant function of vitamin C has been supplanted by uric acid. So uric acid level being a little bit higher kind of takes over some of those antioxidant roles for vitamin C. We know that carnitine, for instance, vitamin C is crucial in carnitine function. Carnitine shuttles fat into the mitochondria. And when you don't have as much vitamin C, you can get carnitine from eating meat. Meat is very rich in carnitine. So you're actually, again, another one of the functions of vitamin C is being, made obsolete by the fact that you're eating all this carnitine. And so, on and on and on. You can talk about a lot of different nutrients with that. Like zinc, for instance, if you eat a lot of phytic acid is found in beans, legumes, grains, it blocks the absorption of zinc, and therefore you have to eat even more zinc. And so when you're not eating those things, you need less zinc. Meat is actually a very good source of zinc, and seafood can be too. And so shellfish particularly, I think.
Yep.
So you've got this sort of better efficiency of absorption, less anti-nutrients, things that block the absorption of that, and then potentially less requirements for these particular vitamins. And so I think we end up seeing, people just not having problems, despite, because these recommended daily allowances or DRIs, dietary reference indices, were determined on a grain-based eating population, eating, 60% of the calories from carbohydrates. And so that may not apply to everybody. I think it doesn't. I think we're finding that out more and more.
Man, I guarantee you 90% of the people listening to this probably had no idea about any of that you just said. And I would have assumed that eating all of the other well-balanced foods would have increased the amount of absorption.
Let me just pose something for you. Let's say we've got this eat the rainbow, eat, all these different colored fruits, vegetables and all this thing. Many of them don't grow in the same area. Many of them don't even grow on the same continent. How would you propose even 500 years ago, you would be able to eat this diet? I mean, it doesn't make sense, right? What would the average person 500 years ago would probably eat a very limited diet of animals around them that they could hunt and whatever small amount of, edible root vegetables and maybe some fruit that was seasonal they could get. It would be a very, very limited diet, and then if you can tell me what fruit or vegetable grows in every single climate, in every geographic region, and every, time of the year, then I'll believe it's essential. But I can tell you what lives in every single climate, in every geographic region, every single time of the year are animals. You can always find an animal to eat, and humans did that. That's why humans are the most geographically diverse species on the planet. We have settled more areas than any other type of animal. The only other animal that comes close to us is a wolf. Wolves are the second most geographically diverse animal on the planet. And guess what wolves eat? They eat basically a carnivorous diet, right? Because they can find little rabbits and critters to catch and eat, or, deer or something like that. So, just from common sense, you think about that. How, you're saying I have to eat this. I'm like, how would someone 500 years ago eat this before we had modern refrigeration and transportation?
Right.
It's impossible.
Yep.
So, I mean, this balance, eat, 35 colors and a wide bounty of fruits and vegetables is based on, trying to sell crap to you, basically.
Yeah, I feel like we're spoiled here in the U.S. with how much, just the availability of food sources too. I mean, it's like that in other countries as well. But wanted to talk about your fitness and weightlifting career as well, and you break world records. Can you talk a little bit about that? People might not know.
Sure. I mean, I've like I said, I've been an athlete my whole life. So, I mean, I guess where I, in medical school, and in fact, it was interesting. I actually dropped out of medical school for a while to go play professional rugby. I left to go to New Zealand.
Wow.
Back, after my first year of medical school, I just kind of I said, hey guys, I'm going to quit and play rugby for a while. I know that, people in medical school thought I was nuts. And I maybe I was, but I had a great time, and I played at this high level of rugby, and I played, for the military, the armed forces, combined services team, and a lot of high level teams in the U.S. And then I went back to medical school. I mean, I got back in. I just said, hey, I just took like a 7-year break, and then I got into powerlifting at some point prior to that and after that, and I set several state and American records in the deadlift specifically. I had super long arms, so I wasn't particularly
same
bench
here.
But I mean, I could deadlift pretty decent. I ended up pulling 772 pounds as a drug, completely lifetime drug-free athlete, which I've always been.
Yeah.
And then I got into I did strongman competitions for a while. So, lifting the big Atlas stones and pulling the trucks and all that stuff. And I ended up at the first ever national championships we had in the U.S. for that. I think I ended up taking like 5th place, which was, not bad. But I realized that if I wasn't willing to take drugs, I wasn't going to likely be able to be successful. I didn't want to do that. And, it was just something. I was in my surgical residency at the time. It was really tough time-wise. It's just really challenging to do that. This was right after I, was doing well in powerlifting. And
Yeah.
so then I ended up eventually getting into something called the Highland Games, where, you're throwing all these things, and I won a world championship and national championship, set a world record in that. And then I got, for a brief period of time, I did some track and field. So I threw the discus and shot put, and a couple of nights I ended up being All-American, Masters All-American in that. And then I think when I was about 43 or 44, 43, I decided that being 300 pounds was just not what I wanted to be anymore. And so I ended up getting into rowing with Concept 2. And, CrossFit, I'm sure you're familiar with Concept 2 rowing machine. So I ended up competing in that, and I set several world records on the Concept 2. The 500 meter row, I pulled 114 at 50 years of age. And so that broke the world record by something like 4 seconds. So I basically shattered the world record. And this was all on a carnivore diet, by the way. This was done, when I turned 50, right before I turned 50, I jumped on a carnivore diet. And I, like I said, I broke like 6 American records and, 3 world records on that thing. And so now I've kind of shifted my focus, and now I'm competing in, well, I shouldn't say I'm competing. I've just started in jiu-jitsu. And so my efforts will be to compete at a high level and hopefully win a world championship, at belt levels and age levels, during that, and then hopefully continue, on for the next, decade or so. It seems like I switch sports about every decade. I get kind of where I realize I can't get any better, and then I'm like, okay, let's try something else and see what we can do with that. So that's where I'm at currently. So, and I'm like I said, I'm on an all full meat diet, and I'm training. Like I just worked out a little bit before this. I did a bunch of deadlifts and push-ups and deadlifts, and then I'll go bang out jiu-jitsu session tonight, and it'll all be on strictly meat, no carbs needed.
That's phenomenal. By the way, what does your home gym look like, out of curiosity, especially right now?
Well, when I have it set up, it's right now it's going to take a 1-car garage, which I think it's around 400 square feet, and I've got a power rack, platform for weights for Olympic lifting, powerlifting stuff. I've got some heavy kettlebells. I like to do heavy kettlebell swings. The biggest one I have is 176 pounds, so I'll do that for a bunch of swings. And then I've got some plyometric boxes, go up to about 60 inches. So I'll either jump on those or I'll use those for different exercises. I'll use it as a loading platform. So I'll take medicine balls, and I've got up to a 200-pound medicine ball where I'll do that, load that thing up and down.
Wow.
I've got a basically an Airdyne type bike, like an air assault type bike, which as is, those things are painful. Concept 2 rowing machine. And then I've got some mats laid out for jiu-jitsu practice, so I can practice, some of that stuff. And so I've got some weighted vests. I've got 175 pounds of weighted vests. I've got 3 vests, 250s and a 75. And so we've got some gymnastic rings, so it gets me everything I need, quite honestly. I'm pretty happy with what I have, as far as, it took me a long time to sort of put that stuff together, and I've got, to where I can train at a very high level, at home, which is nice. And particularly when they keep shutting gyms down on everybody for,
oh my gosh,
reasons which I think make no sense, but anyway.
Yeah. Doing it over and over again. What are some of do you have any highlights in your head of people who have adopted the carnivore diet and all of a sudden just their health outcomes changed incredibly dramatically, like a couple that just absolutely stand out to you?
Yeah, there's so many, guys. I would encourage people, if they're listening, to go to MeatRx.com and click on success stories. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of testimonials. It's amazing what we've seen. But some of the ones that really, like I said, every day, 7 days a week, I have a meeting at 9 a.m. with the community, and I sit there and host a meeting for an hour. And sometimes we have a guest lecturer on, and we talk about, whatever topic du jour. But most of the time, it's just me chatting with the members of the audience, and we're kind of supporting each other and getting feedback. And I've seen several. We had one gal who was literally bedridden, barely could get out of bed, had to use a walker to get around her house. Fast forward 6 months later, she is now out there running around, dancing in the street. She was out in the rain dancing in the street because she was so happy and overjoyed. I've got people that I had a gal who's, she's lifetime of cerebral palsy, never could exercise. I remember she sitting in the meetings, month after month, and finally she adopted the diet. And she was like, within a month, she says, I finally feel like exercising for the first time in my life. And this woman's probably 60. She's in there every meeting, like just working out, lifting her weights. And it just really brings a smile to my face. And, I had another physician who had something called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder.
Yep.
And so what happens is, their collagen is all stretched out. And so they often end up dislocating their joints. As orthopedic surgeons, we used to see this not infrequently. And her life, what she told me was pretty much every single morning of her life, she would dislocate joints in her sleep. So she'd wake up in the morning and her shoulder would be out of socket. Maybe an ankle would be out of socket, maybe her wrist would be out of socket. So she'd have to get up in the morning and pop joints back into place, put on her white coat, go to the hospital, work in the emergency, she was an emergency room physician. And then, every other shift, one of her shoulder would pop out of place and she'd have to put it in the middle of the shift. That had been her life for years, for decades. And, she was developing arthritis. As you can imagine, when your joints pop in and out there, it becomes traumatic and you get a lot of, she was in a lot of pain. She went on a carnivore diet. Within 1 month, pain goes away. She stops having dislocations. It just stops dislocating, which I was blown away by that, because I was like, it doesn't make sense. This is a genetic connective tissue disorder. She's also is now going into the gym, losing weight, getting stronger, and has basically regained her life back. It's just incredible. And so I've seen obviously people with post-traumatic stress disorder, people that were suicidally depressed, changing their diet, going to a meat-based diet, completely eradicates that. These people get their lives back. And it's just on and on and on. I've got, it's like, I've seen this thousands of times now, and it's just, it always puts a smile on my face. Nothing surprises me anymore. In the beginning, I was like, wow, this is really unexpected, because I didn't understand it. But today it's like, I'm not shocked by anything, because I've seen just about everything get better.
Sure. Well, and it's the kind of thing that I feel like the majority of people already enjoy eating meat anyway. So going full bore on that it's not like, I don't know how to describe this. It's not like you're telling people go 90% into vegetables, which is going to be insanely hard to consume and really a grind for some people. Like to me, I hear you saying, you can eat a ribeye every meal, and I'm like, great. It's just super appealing. And I don't know. I love the approach that you're taking with the diet and the success that, I don't know. There's too many success stories coming out of that to ignore. I'm surprised that they haven't. Somebody independently hasn't funded the research to do something like this already.
Well, Harvard University has done a research project on this, and so that study is been, the data's done. The study, I think, has been written up. It's going to be published probably later this year.
Oh, good.
That has about 2,000 people. I helped to sort of, get people, volunteers for that study. They've done that. I didn't have anything to do with collecting the data or viewing the data, but I have, they've told me what it shows, and it's going to show a very good outcome.
Nice.
For the people doing this diet. And so it's probably going to be controversial, and it's probably going to piss off, the people at the Physicians Committee for Irresponsible Medicine,
of course.
They're going to want to probably demand a retraction or something like that. But there's been a few other independent studies. There was a study out of Switzerland looking at, it was a case series of about 6 patients, one on a carnivore diet for treating something called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO. Mm-hmm. And they showed 100% efficacy. There's another study out of UC Merced where they looked at people on a carnivore diet, and it was more of a psychological survey, to see what was the motivation. And again, it was people are doing it because they want to get healthy, and the results show that people are getting healthy. So there are some people that are taking an interest in this, and I think even more so. There's more and more physicians that are prescribing this to their patients. They are seeing, some of them are willing to say, look, I just want my patients to get healthy, and I'm tired of, telling people you're going to die of a heart attack in 30 years, so don't do this and that. But instead I have to deal with them being sick every single day for the next 30 years, waiting to avoid their heart attack while they're in misery. And I think it's where we miss the boat. The real truth of the matter is we have no idea what the perfect diet is to prevent you from dying early or living long or not getting cancer. That data isn't out there. I'm not going to say carnivore diet is, because I have no way of knowing that. No one does.
Yeah.
Anybody who's promoting any particular diet for longevity doesn't really have the data to back it up, because we just can't do the proper studies it would take. And so what I like to look at is, if I've got somebody in front of me that's sick and suffering, I want to end that disease. I want to make them healthy today, tomorrow, so that they feel good and can participate in life. And I think if we could just focus on that as physicians, then we would do the right things. And then I think probably those people that are healthy and feel good are going to actually have a better quality of life, and probably a longer life too, quite honestly. So, I mean, that's where I come from.
Yeah. One last question. I wanted to ask you about soy. I know you've had a couple of posts there recently, and I know that was a big fad at one point. I don't know how much of a big deal it is now. What are some of the dangers of going to soy and having that as part of your diet?
Well, I mean, it's probably like anything. There's a dosage amount that's a problem, and there's some people that are very anti-soy, and there's some people that are very pro-soy. I mean, the literature, quite honestly, is quite mixed on that. Some studies will show that soy is protective for certain conditions, where the other ones will show it may exacerbate. There's a recent study came out looking at soy consumption and irritable bowel syndrome, which we have. It's a growing epidemic. So many people have poor gut function, and we see that soy has now been incorporated into a lot of food. I mean, if you go and look at the American diet, a lot of what we get through particularly processed food is soy-based, and we have a soy in a lot of. They sneak it in everything, and in fact, the number of calories people eat from soybean oil exceeds what we get from beef in the United States right now, which most people would be shocked by that. But you actually eat more soy. I mean, the average American eats more soy calories, than they do beef calories. And so there are problems, I mean, one of the problems with soy, soybeans contain trypsin inhibitors. Trypsin inhibitors are antiproteolytic compounds that prevent the breakdown of protein. And so it decreases the efficiency by which you can absorb protein. And so, some people talk about it, having estrogenic properties, and that's a plant phytoestrogen. Whether or not that's a real effect or not, that's very controversial. Some people seem to think so, some people don't. Some people think you got to be drinking it taking it in massive doses for it to be a problem. I don't consume any soy, or at least not knowingly. So I mean, I think it's something that you can get. There's better sources of protein. I will say that, and I would certainly point to any animal protein to be a better source of protein, than soy, for many reasons.
Yeah, understand. Where can people find you? I know you've got website and all that. Just for people who don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so my preference place of having people find me at MeatRx, you can sign up for free, for a month for free there. I'm there every day, 7 days a week. 9 a.m. You can talk directly to me, just like we're having a conversation now.
Awesome. That's
my preference, because I like to be able to interact with people and actually develop some sort of, to find out what the nuances, because they're questions. I mean, I'm on Instagram, Shawn Baker 1967, ShawnBaker 1967. I'm on Twitter at SBakerMD. I've got a YouTube channel, Shawn Baker, which I put up a video most days. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of some of my social media posts are somewhat inflammatory. I mean, sometimes that's done intentionally. I mean, I want to get people to be passionate about things. I want people to think about things, I mean, I think most people are, when they meet me in person or they talk to me, they say, well, you're very different from your social media posts, but it's a different medium. You've got, Twitter, you got 280 characters, and trying to tell a story, and, it's tough to impart humor or nuance into some of these social media posts. And so some people don't get it. I mean, sometimes I put stuff up there that most people find it to be very funny, and there'll always be some people that get very offended. Of course. And it just drives me a little bit, sometimes I just block those people. It's kind of useless. If you're so easily offended, I don't have a use for you. So go away.
Just don't be on social media.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, welcome to the internet.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You're
welcome to life. Yeah.
You're walking into the offended zone.
Right,
oh,
exactly.
geez. Well, thank you so much, Shawn. Really appreciate your time. And you guys, if you haven't checked out his work and the website, please do. And hop on those calls with him in the mornings as well. But thank you so much for being on. Really appreciate you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Let me know when this comes out, and I'll be happy to sort of talk about it. So thanks a bunch. Thank you for listening. Please give FreedomCast a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. It would mean a lot to our business. Plus, it's fun to read y'all's reviews. See you next time.